workflows, advanced Google Sheets workflows with Google Sheets guru Ben Collins. And I just want to run through some of the goals we have for this webinar before we kick off. We're here to gain insights into what it takes to make a great spreadsheet dashboard. So Ben and I will just have a little conversation to kind of kick things off. You guys will get to know a little bit more about him and his background. And then we'll do a couple demos. We'll do a step-by-step demo of building your own cash flow calculator, a step-by-step demo of calculating your total spend in a category by month. We'll do a Q&A session at the end, and then we'd love to get your feedback. There will be a survey that we pop up at the end of the webinar after you leave the webinar that just helps us gauge what your experience was, what we could do better. And just a note that we will share a copy of the demo sheet that Ben will be working in, a one-page resource, and a link to the recording tomorrow via email if you registered for this. So I'm actually going to turn my video on. You guys can do the same. Hey, it's Heather here.
Hi, Ben here.
I chat with a lot of you in support, as does Krista. Maybe some of you haven't seen Ben, and he's our special guest today. So one quick note about the Q&A. There is a Q&A button in the Zoom controls at the bottom. You can ask a question at any point during the session, and we will have the Q&A session at the end, but feel free to add your questions at any point into the Q&A tool. That's our preference versus the chat tool.
Yeah, just note it's a separate section, and that'll help us manage the questions better.
All right, awesome. Well, let's kick it off, Ben. So just a few questions for you. How did you first feel inspired to dive into Google Sheets and all of its power? You've been doing this for a while, and like, what inspired you to sort of nerd out in this space?
Yeah, so I have to go back a little way to the work I did before the work I do now. And I started life as an accountant and spent all my days in Excel, as I'm sure most accountants do. And my wife was running her own business at the time that was all G Suite based. And so she was in Google Sheets and Calendar and all those G Suite apps. And she occasionally would ask for help with spreadsheet related stuff. And I was like, oh, this Google Sheets is pretty interesting. It's in the browser, which is cool. And most of the stuff from Excel comes across to Sheets. So I kind of just came across it through helping others, through helping my wife mainly. And then started, actually, we built up to actually building a dashboard, funnily enough, for one of my wife's product launches. And that led to a blog post because I sort of was thinking of changing careers and thought, I need a blog. You know, that's the first step in changing a career, right? I need a blog before I do anything else.
I did it too.
Yeah, exactly, right? And it's, you know, we laugh and joke, but actually, you know, that's now the backbone of my whole business is this blog and all the content and the traffic it gets. So that first blog post was sort of the beginning of this journey. And I went through that first year. It was all over the place, really. I was doing some Google Sheets stuff, still doing SQL and Tableau, which was from my old work, and Excel, trying to learn web programming, all these other things. But eventually it sort of, the content that picked up traffic and that led to some opportunities was the Google Sheets stuff, because there wasn't much content out there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I just sort of went all in on that once I had enough momentum.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we love your website. We recommend it to our customers all the time. We're like, we don't know necessarily how to do this, but hey, here's Ben. Here's his website. Yeah. He knows how to do this. So it's exciting to be able to chat with you tonight. So what experience and knowledge can you share about building a sustainable Google Sheets dashboard that you can integrate into your everyday workflow? And by sustainable, I just mean that it's integrated in your workflow and it doesn't break and it sustains and it's there and it works and it keeps working.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. And I think what I've learned from many years of doing this now is that I used to try and probably overcomplicate things because I could, you know, I sort of had learned these complex formulas, or I thought, this would be really interesting if I could do it, you know, a certain way. And I lost track of just trying to answer the question and became too focused on trying to make it pretty, or trying to make, you know, the one single array formula to do the whole thing instead of just having several helper columns, which would be much easier. So I guess my number one thing would be just to keep things as simple as you can. And then when you start with dashboards as well, the other big thing is to start with the question, the why.
Yeah.
So, why am I building this? What question am I trying to answer? And start there and sort of work back and say, okay, the data I need to answer that question, and then the steps I need to sort of manage that data, to analyze that data to get my answer, and work sort of from that why question, because that will then influence your dashboard and what it looks like and what it displays. A few other things, though, I'd say that it is worth putting some time into making it visually appealing, especially if you're sharing it with colleagues and clients. It doesn't have to be crazy, but just enough that it just looks interesting. It sort of highlights the necessary bits of information, rather than just being sort of one big dense table that nobody's going to take the time to decipher. So the quicker you can make it your information absorbed, for the reader, then the more effective your messaging is going to be. And then the other tip I think with dashboarding is to separate out the different steps. So have a tab for your data, or even separate sheets for your data maybe, and then a tab for doing any kind of calculation work, and then finally another tab that's your presentation layer, rather than trying to do it all in one tab or just two tabs. Split those out so that you can see the sort of evolution of your data, and when you come to make changes, it's way easier than if it's just all done in one single tab where your sort of data's right there and you're just doing the analysis on top of that, in that data sheet. I think they're my my lessons I've learned over the years.
And those are great. And being on this team since very early in Tillery's inception, like I can totally attest to everything that you're saying. Like we've transitioned to trying to make our sheets much more simple, visually appealing, and having that presentation layer has really helped us, I think.
I think that what happens is that you build a dashboard, for yourself or at work or clients, and you're all excited and you build it and it's great and it's phenomenally complex and you're really chuffed because you've got it to work. And then you go away for a month or two and use it, but you're not looking at the mechanics of it. And then suddenly one day it breaks. And you come back and it takes you all day to figure out, what the heck this formula was doing, or, where this bit of data came from. So if you can keep things simple and you can keep some, I always try and put a page on there as well. That's sort of my notes page, or that just runs through the steps I've done to the dashboard maybe, or the bits of analysis, so that then it's like a crib sheet if I come back or somebody else comes back to then understand it.
And we'll see that in your demos that you'll give us in a moment. Okay, just a couple other quick questions. What does your own Tiller-powered Google Sheet do best for you?
So actually, it's the problem it solved for me and my wife was just to help us really understand our spending better, because we had children fairly recently. Suddenly spending just seemed to balloon through the roof. And we didn't really know why. We just, wow, it's another big month, and we, what's going on? So it's really helped us just look at our credit cards and look at our accounts and say, okay, well, we've got childcare, we've got all these expenses we didn't have before, but we're now trying to, we have them categorized and we can understand them. So I think just being able to really have a very granular look at our spending, so that we can understand why it's happening, and then try and sort of work out maybe ways to improve it. And also we can see over time, because we know, for example, that childcare will exist for a certain period of time when the children are certain ages. So we know then that after that period there might be that expense might go away, but then there might be other things coming in. But you can then start to understand it over a longer period of time as well. And I think that there's some famous marketer said that you have to measure something before you can start to improve it. And I think that was the case with us. That we, just by being able to look at our expenses and understand them, we could then start to figure out how to save some money if we wanted, and things like that.
Sure.
Make bigger strategic choices.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than just going along with a head buried in the sand.
Right.
Sort of thing, so.
That awareness piece is huge, and that's really what we hope to help our customers achieve, is just awareness at the very basic level. So thank you. All right, so last question. Do you have any of your own upcoming webinars or workshops that you want to share with the audience?
Sure. So I don't have any webinars actually on planned at the moment, but I have a couple of courses coming up soon. So a new one about formulas. So I have an advanced formulas course, which actually we might mention a bit later on, that covers some of the functions we'll see tonight. Mm-hmm. And I have a new course that's going to sort of follow on, be a step up again from that one, of some really crazy stuff in with formulas. Having said keep it simple, that course is totally the opposite end of that spectrum. Right. It's about being as complex as you can be. So a little less practical, but much more fun in some ways.
Yeah.
And then also the AppScript course.
Okay.
So AppScript is the coding language for extending your Google Sheets, and that course launch is going to be in September.
Cool.
AppScript. So they're the big things on the horizon.
That sounds awesome, Ben. And you have some free courses. We'll be sharing some resources, and that one pager we'll send out that includes some resources on Ben's website, including a free course that will incorporate a lot of what we'll cover in these demos. All right, so let's go ahead and kick off with the demos here. So just a couple kind of precursory things. We are running the demos out of a Tillery monthly budget spreadsheet template. So if you're not using this template, you can follow along, but you'll want to understand some of the caveats of the transaction sheet. Might have a different column order, that kind of thing. In this specific demo with the Tillery monthly budget, we've made a couple customizations to the transaction sheet, including a group column and a type column. And you can add these very easily. All I've done here is just I inserted a column to the right of the institution column here in my transaction sheet. And then I pasted a formula from our help center for getting the group and the type into the transaction sheet. And I'm not going to demo this, but I am going to just show you the help articles. They include these array formulas here. You can just copy and paste, right click, control copy, and then you would just paste it into the blank header here at the top. We're not going to go into how these array formulas work because they are pretty complex. It's a little beyond the scope of these demos, but in order to follow along with the example sheet we'll be sending tomorrow, and sort of like understanding how Ben's breaking down the demos, you will want these two columns in your transaction sheet. And so the group column is there, and then the type column is also there here, and you can just search we'll have these included in the one pager as well, the help articles, to get you straight to these and getting those array formulas in there. So I've wired all that up. This is a pre-categorized data set. And so in any of our templates, there's a category sheet. Your first step is always just adding your categories, assigning a group to the category, and then assigning a type. And that's where the type and the group are coming from. These are read-only columns. They're just populating what is being set for the specific category based on what's in the category sheet. So if I remove my category here, you'll see that my group and my type are going to go away. And there they go. And then if I add it back, then you will see that they reappear. So these aren't to be edited. They're being populated from that array formula. And then beyond that, it's pretty much the basics. You'll have your categories and then just categorizing your transactions. That is that data that you're going to need to sort of have any output in either of these demos. And really to help build that awareness, you have to categorize your transactions. And the one pager will also just have some other basics. And I think that's everything I needed to go through. So I will let Ben take it away. I'll stop sharing my screen and he can share his. And
let's give this a whirl.
He'll kick us off.
So hope I share the right screen. There we go. So can you see this screen now?
Yep.
Great. And if I make this full screen, can everyone see that?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, so just in the transactions tab here, and I thought I'd just show you one quick thing with the header row, which is not frozen at the moment. I thought I'd just show you a quick trick. If you hover over that bar at the top there where the hand shows up, and you drag it down, that's the quick way to freeze your top row there.
Did not know that. Fancy.
So that's just a nice little trick. It's always quicker than going up and finding it up here in the menu. So what I thought we would try and do today is a quick demo of trying to build this cash flow. Now, a cash flow is, you know, your money coming into your account and your money going out the accounts, and then you can net them off and see whether you're in the red or not. And so we'll just try and look at the formulas and build up this. It's got a lot of categories you can see, but eventually we get down to the bottom with the outflows and then a net. So we'll try and build this live. It'll probably break. If I go too quickly, you know, do say. And if you get confused between me saying column A and calamare, they're pretty similar, but I'm not talking about fried squid. I'm talking about the first column of our spreadsheet. So hopefully we'll avoid that. Okay, so what I've done here is just set up the header rows on a blank sheet now, just so we can save a little bit of time with me typing that stuff in. And the first thing we need to do is to get some categories for the inflows and then some categories for the outflows. And they're going to come from this categories page here. So we want to grab all of the categories here where they are income, like this one here for interest, and then come back after that and grab everything that's an expense. And we're going to omit the transfers from this, from the cash flow. So we're going to use the function, the filter function, which is going to filter our data set based on some conditions we give it. So we'll go back to categories, and we'll just click the whole of column A there, just click up on the top. And the reason I leave it open-ended is so that if I add more data down at some further future point in time, it's going to include that all of that data in that column A. So, you know, if I add more, it's not going to miss it. So we'll hit a comma and we'll give it condition 1. So we want to look in column C, and it's really important now that column C is completely open-ended as well, so that they're the same sized ranges for the filter condition. And we want this one to equal income. And I just add the income there just inside the quotation marks to make it a text string. So let's hit enter and keep our fingers crossed. Yay! We got it to work. So we've got our categories there for the inflow. So a few things to mention on that is if we go and add a new one down here, you know, this is an income new, and we set it to be income, then that should come through there, which it does straight away onto our sheet. If we add another 10 so that it sort of would flow past this line here where the total inflows is written, because this is just a piece of text, then that would break this formula. So if for example, if I, you know, if I try to delete all these rows just to move this up and I didn't leave enough space, it's going to break that formula. So the point here is just to make sure you have plenty of space for this formula to expand, because this is a dynamic formula. It's going to fill up whatever space you give it. And if you don't give it enough space, it will break. So let's get rid of this one because it was made up. And the nice thing now is we can now copy this formula down to the outflows section of our thing and just change it from income to expense, because it's the same formula. It's still looking in category A, and all it's going to do, we can see there, it just picks up all of those categories we have, and we still have a little bit of space left, enough for 2 more. So just to recap, it's picking up everything that's an expense line. So it would get those ones, it would skip that transfer, it'll get these ones, you know, these ones, and all the ones up higher as well, but skip the ones that are transfer or income if it's not the income one in this case. Okay, so far so good. We've got the categories, we've got along the top here, we've got our months, and you can see that these are actual dates because we want the dates to match the dates in our transaction sheet, you'll see in a minute, but it's the first day of each month. And I'll show you in a minute how we can format that at the end to look like the just this Jan, Feb, March, because you can still see these ones are months as well, dates rather, up here. And so we can just format them to look like that, but underneath there's still a date. So what we're going to do here is sum our data. So we're going to go to transactions and sum up the amount column. But we have 2 conditions to check this time. We want to check the category, and then we want to check the date. So we're going to make sure that we only include the values that relate to that category and that date. So we'll use a sum ifs. So it allows you to choose the range you're going to sum and then specify however many conditions you want to check against. So we'll come back to transactions and we'll pick column E. And then we'll hit the comma. And then the criteria range is going to be this category column. And then we'll hit comma again. Then we'll come back to the cash flow sheets and we'll click this interest box here. And I'll just stop there. This is another tip, is to build your formulas in steps. So don't try to do everything in one go, because then if it breaks, you're not quite sure where it goes wrong. But there we go, that one. So that one worked okay. Let's format it now so that when I copy it around, it will bring all that formatting with it. So now what we want to do is add the month, because at the moment that's given us a total amount for the interest category, but it's not split by month. So we'll come back up here again and do a comma again. I'm going to add a range 2 to check and a criteria 2 to check. So we're going to come back to transactions. And over on the right-hand side here, we have this column month in K. And if you look, these are all dates that are coming from the Tiller bots. And they're formatted to be the first day of the month. So they're going to match what we have as our titles. So we'll click K. We'll hit comma again, and we'll come back to cash flow demo. Now, the column the cell I'm trying to click is underneath my little formula pane, which makes it hard to click. So I'm going to just type it in. So it's B5. It's just, let me move that up, right there behind the, when I hit enter, let me double click. Excuse me. So there we go. So it's that blue one there that I was trying to click, and I just had to type that in. If you sometimes, if you can't click because it's behind the Google pane, you might have to click a cell next to it, hit enter, and then manually just change that one or move it across. So that's a bit of a pain sometimes, but it's okay.
Nice trick, though.
That's a helpful tip, yeah.
So, so there we go. So that now it looks better. It's 88 cents. So what we'd like to do now is just drag this across the row. Is it going to work though? Let's see.
Dun, dun, dun.
No, it doesn't look like it's worked, does it? So what we need to do is we need to lock our references very carefully, because if I double click this first one, you can see it's getting the interest and the right month. If I double click the second one, it's trying to find the amount 88 cents as the category, not the actual correct category. So what we need to do is this column A, we need to put the $ in front, which just locks it to this column A, not calamari, column A. So I'll hit return, and this time when I drag across, it should fix all of those for me, except it still doesn't, because we haven't locked these column references. So again, what it's doing is when up here, it's moved these transaction column references one across with each row, or with each column. So we'll hit F4, and we'll hit F4, and that will just add those $ for the columns we're selecting in the transactions there. And then that should work as we drag across.
There we go.
So that's working now. What it doesn't do is it doesn't work when we drag down yet. It's giving me 0, but what it's doing is trying to use this number here as the month. So we need to do the same thing of locking B5 there. And then we hit enter. And then when we drag that down now, you can see those paychecks coming through.
That locking cell thing is really powerful and is not even something I knew about. I use the sum ifs a lot for doing like data analysis here at Tiller, but like I never understood the locking, so that's really useful. Yeah,
so the locking is kind of really crucial to learn to see how that works. So we're not using this one here, so that row doesn't actually doesn't matter. So let's just clear those ones out so we're not confused. And then what we can do is we can copy this one down below, and then we just need to change this 5 now to, so that was row 5. We want it to be row 23 now. So let's just change that 5 there to a 23. And then we should be able to just drag that all the way across. Oops, I'm missing that December there, doesn't look right. So let's just copy that 12 down to there. Okay, so we've got now that full row.
I haven't paid for my AAA subscription this month yet, so that's why there's no data there.
We're going to drag down, and I think it's as far as row 66. No, a little bit further. But you can see once you get those relative references set up, it's very, very quick because you can just drag these formulas around and know that you're looking up the right thing. So for example, if I click this one, just any random one in the middle, it's looking for dining out, and it's looking for the 1st of May, so the month of May. So it's going to go to transactions column to column E, which was the amount.
Mm-hmm.
And then, excuse me, it's going to look for, was it dining outs? I think, dining out. So it's only going to return the ones that are dining out, and it's only going to return the ones that are in the month of May. So that's how that one is working. So essentially they're the two formulas. So the filter function rather, and the SUMIFS function that have, that are the sort of engine of this cash flow. And this is relatively simple, but we're just keeping it simple. We're still answering a question, and we're still going to get a sort of result that we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'll do now is just add all the totals, and Google helps us out here and gives us the suggested.
I love that.
Saves us making mistakes. So we'll put that one in. The total inflows, what we'll do is we'll just highlight that whole thing. We'll include these so that if our data expands, we'll be able to include that in the totals. If we do get more categories, you will have to drag these formulas down a cell. They're not array formulas the way it's set up. So we'll drag that all the way across. Gives us a nice total. And then we'll do the same thing down here. So let me move over a little. So sum, it's going to tell us. We'll hit enter. And we'll drag this one down as far as we need to go. And we'll quickly put in the total for this one. So sum up to the top. And then we can just drag this one across. And then lastly, we'll just do the net cash flow. And that's going to be the positive money that we get, the money inflowing to our accounts. And in our case, it's going to be then adding a negative number because the outflow is already negative. Mm-hmm. So we just add those two together and they net out to give us a positive $62 that month. We can drag that all the way across. And there we go. And that's given us now, so that's essentially the cash flow statement or the cash flow dashboard built. And you can see it was sort of really just two formulas and then the sums that we just copied around the whole place, and we could fill out that whole thing. So the last thing to do really would be to make it look nicer so that you actually can quickly see things more easily than you can at the moment where it feels very dense. So I promised you I'd show you how we change the heading on these ones. So let's do that first, because these they don't look as nice and not as easy to read quickly as an actual Jan, Feb, March sort of thing. So we'll come up to formats, number, and then more formats, custom number formats, and we'll clear that out and we'll change it to MMM, which is going to give us the so it's going to take a date and just format it as an abbreviated word for that month. So the 3-letter words. So there we go, Jan, Feb, March, April, May. Then Shift Command E or Control Shift E if you're on a PC. So Shift Command on a Mac, Control Shift on a PC. Just center those. And then we probably make the totals bold. Center that one, make that one bold.
And you can do bold Control B or Command B.
Yep. So we'll center all of these ones. Let's format them and number format. Now the nice thing is once you've used it once,
wow,
it's going to show up in the quick options there. So we'll click MMM, make them bold, make that top row bold, sorry. There we go. And then let's go formats and do alternating colors, because that's a nice way to just add some clarity to your sheets.
Sure.
And we'll include the footer. Same one down here. Just go down to there. Formats, alternating colors, include the footer again. Okay, and after that, the rest is sort of really up to you how you might, go ahead and format there. I'll show you one more thing we might do is to, you can highlight, if you click up between A and 1, you can highlight everything, the entire sheet. And then we can go and choose a different, so maybe we'll choose overpass or Lato, that might be something that's quite nice. Make that one a little bigger. And yeah, I think you can see now how we would get to the solution there just with a few more steps, changing a few background colors. And I don't think there's probably too much value there by running through that. So, but you'll get both copies in the sheet that Heather will share afterwards.
I felt like you were sort of channeling Bob Ross there for a minute.
I'll take it. Okay, so I think to make sure we have enough time to do the query demo, let's not spend another 5 minutes on formatting stuff, and let's dive into the query function. So, so this one here is set up just to, we're going to run through a whole bunch of examples that just build from sort of relatively simple to building through to getting a little more complex. And each one has a little placeholder. We're going to put the formula and a little sort of snippet of information to say what we're trying to do. So we're shifting gears here a little bit, but what we're going to do now is just step away from building a dashboard and look at building, look at just specifically the query function so that we can analyze our data and extract the bits of data we want. And the query function is definitely, it's the most powerful function in Google Sheets because it does the work of about 15 other functions, and it can do a lot of things that pivot tables can do. So it's a really amazing function actually. And the way it works is that you choose your data sets and then you run if you're familiar with SQL, then it's a language for databases, but you use a sequence of expressions that allows you to tell Google how to sort of analyze and return your data. So let's check it out. So actually, I'm going to start just way over to the side here for a minute, and you'll see why. So we'll start with query. We'll come into transactions. So let me just bear with me a moment. Okay, so we'll come to transaction sheets and we will highlight everything from B1 down to P. And then what I'll do is I'll just chop off that last reference of the P and we'll get rid of the B as well. So that we're just looking at everything from B to P. I'm skipping A because there doesn't look like there's anything in A for this one. So that's our data. Let's F4 to lock it because it's going to be the same data sets. We've left, like I said, left that reference P open so that when the Tiller bot adds more data, it's always going to get included in your query. And then the simplest query is when you say select star, and I'll explain what it means when we see the output. And then since I know there's one header row, I'm going to specify that there's one header row for that final argument there. There we go. It just took a minute, but what it does, select star means select all of my columns. And it's going to select all of the rows because I haven't put any sort of filter on for the rows. So that's just a copy of our entire data set. And you're thinking now, oh, wow, big deal, this query function. That wasn't very helpful. But let's run through the steps now of what we can do with it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just limit. I'll just show you this so that we can sort of get back to the demo. So limit 5, and all that does is restrict and just returns me 5 rows only, the first 5 rows there. because that way now I can drag this over to my demo and it fits. So that's how we select everything. So now I can just copy this down to example 2. And we start moving on. What we'd like to do now is just select specific columns, because we're not interested in this description column, for example, because it's too granular, it's sort of unique. We're really interested in the category which we've done, because we want to know how much we spend on dining out or gifts or whatever. And obviously we're interested in E, and they're the 2 columns we're principally working with, and then the date as well, which was column K there, the month rather. So they're the sort of columns, because by categorizing those things and aggregating, we get to really understand our data. So let's remove that star and select columns instead. And the way we select them is just to write the letter of the column from the transaction sheet and separate it by a comma there. So D and E. So that was D and E. That's all we selected there. And I've just left that limit there just so that we don't lose, we don't have too much data. So at the moment, this is just everything still. What we'd like to do is to really aggregate that and know what's the total amount for gifts, what's the total amount for vacation funds. So the same way you do a pivot table. So we can use the sum. So we're saying select column D, which is the category, and then sum up all the values for that category. And then to make this work, we need to group by D, which just means roll up, aggregate those amounts by the category types. So we hit enter quickly, and there we go. What it's done is it's just added up all of these categories, and it's told us what a total amount is for that category.
And that's for the entire data set.
That's the entire data set. And it's got this blank row because we left it open-ended.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is what we're doing at the moment very much is sort of your analysis that sits in between your data and your dashboard. So, you do some work eventually once you've got the data in a form you wanted, you would then do some work to sort of tidy it up. And there's ways you can remove things like this blank row with the query. But you see, already it's telling you useful information, because it's the same as a pivot table where you said, okay, I spent $1,800 on groceries so far and $4,000 on gifts. A very generous person. I think we all want to be friends with this person.
Yeah.
So you get a handle on your data much more so than just scrolling through these transactions. So far we're sort of up to what we've done with the pivot table. Let's try another step. So we'll just copy again. We'll copy this one down as our starting point. Now, at the moment, it would just add up all the data, as you said, Heather. And so it's going to aggregate all of the 2019, 2018, 2017 data, all sort of mixed up. So what we really need to do is just make sure that we only include the 2019 data. And the way we do that is by filtering out the rows that we don't want. So we want to chuck away all the 2018 stuff and just keep 2019. So we're going to do that with something called the where filter. So we select our columns. So don't worry about the sum there, it's just still selecting a column. And we put a space, and before we group it, so before we sort of squash it, roll it all up, let's chuck away some rows and keep just the ones we want. So we're going to say where, that's a year. And let me just check this formula so I can get it right. And if we look quickly back at the transactions column, actually we're going to use this date B here. It would work just as well with the month column actually, but we'll use this date B. So that's what we got too. So year B equals 2019. So year is another formula function rather that they have available inside this string here. So same as the sum, it's a function that's available for us to use inside this string, and we're just saying take the year value from the whole date column and make sure it's equal to 2019. So only include transactions in this analysis where they equal 2019. Then do that grouping, that roll up, and we should see what we get. And I think it's the same answer because it's the It doesn't have any 2018, but what it has done is chuck away the blank rows.
Yeah.
Which is handy. So again, let's copy this one down to example 5. So far it's the same. What we can do though is we can pivot the categories out by months now as well. So we'll say pivot. So pivot comes after the group by, and we're going to say month B. So starting to get a little bit more complex now, the formula. But again, we can just read it out in plain English, and I think always that helps. So we say select, hey, I want to choose these columns. We're going to choose D. I'm going to choose column E. Don't worry about that sum yet. Where the year of column B, so we come back and we know that we're looking at column B, was our date column. So where the year in this column equals 2019, then we're going to do that roll up, the group by, where we aggregate the data. And finally, I want to pivot, which just means essentially I want to add some columns. So that's what the pivot is saying, just spread the data over columns as well. Mm-hmm. And the columns I want to use is from column B. So if we go back to transactions, it's this column again, and it's basically just pulling the month from that column, and that's what we're using. So the interesting thing to note quickly with this one is that it's this month formula. So this month one up here, because it's based on a sort of SQL language, it starts from 0, and it would run up to 11 for December instead of 12. So it goes from 0 to 11 instead of 1 to 12. So, you know, just as long as you know that, and then you can make sure that in your head and your calculations, you're matching that, because otherwise you'll be off a month and things might go pear-shaped then. So let's copy it down and just see how we might fix that, because that's confusing to me, and I'm sure it's confusing to a lot of people. We really want to have a 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, to show our months. And it's relatively quick, easy. We could just add 1 inside of our calculation there, inside a string, and it just switches them into 1, 2, 3, 4. And when the data only goes up to July at the moment, but if we had data up to December, it would run through all the way to December, and it would be a 12 then instead of an 11. Okay, so we'll come down to number 7. Look at this, we're cruising here, getting through it.
We are.
And then it goes wrong as soon as I say that. So yeah, okay, so it's telling me this is an interesting one actually. This is it's a good error, because I like errors because you learn from them. So you know, always look at what it says. It's saying the array result would not be expanded because it would override data in A178. So what we'll do is we'll go down and see what's in A178. Okay, I've got some text that I typed in. So all we need to do to fix this error is let's highlight a bunch of rows, insert 12 more. And there we go. All we needed to do was just give that array formula more space, because now it's got so many categories. It just needed space to live in. So just that was all that was showing there. Let me see what was number 8. Okay, so number 8 was just to say, okay, well, how can we just select a single month to focus on now? Because ultimately, in the next 5 minutes, what we'll try and get to is just having a drop-down chooser. So we pick a month. Just
so this doesn't derail you, this is number 7.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep. And what we want to try and get to is just to have a drop-down where I can pick a month, and then my query function will just show me data for that month. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is look at how we might add a filter. So we did this filter on the year. How can we do a filter on the month? And so what we'll do again is what we do is let's start with the transactions again and just make sure we understand what we're trying to do. So we filtered on this column, and we pulled the year out with that function, and we said make sure that the year equals 2019. So what we're going to do now is just pull the month out from there, and then just say, hey, make sure the month equals 1, or month equals 2, or month equals 3, and that's the way we can make that work. So we've got the year there. So we want to add the month. And the way we do it is we say and, because we want to add a second one. So we're saying filter 1 and filter 2. So really, it's very much like sort of reading English.
Yeah.
It's like a sentence. So just read it out in your head and it should sort of all flow and follow. And that's how you know that your query function is on the right track. So we'll put the month in, we'll say B, and then we'll set it equal to, let's just say 1 for now. And there we go. Now, this is just quickly, this is not January we're looking at, even though it says 1 there. This is where that month thing gets kind of confusing. We're actually just looking here at, this is now the February data. So if I put 0, then that's going to give me the January data. So that index thing we just talked about a few minutes ago, kind of rearing its ugly head there, it makes it a little confusing. So let's keep going. Let's copy down number 7. And I think this is going to be really useful for people who've maybe not seen this before. At the moment, what we've done is we've had to type in. So if I want to see, a different month, I'm going to have to come in and change my actual formula, enter. So this is a really tedious way of working. We don't want to sort of hard code things in our formulas like this, ideally, because we can't make changes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do now is, instead of writing a number 5, is let's link to a cell where I can just type in, my number 5, in this cell here, and just link to that cell. So we'll do that now. So we'll get rid of the 5, and this works generally with any query function of how do we link to an external cell. So the first thing I need to do is close off. See this quotation at the front? So I just need to put a second quotation to close down that string. A few spaces to give me some space, and then we'll put that quotation again to open up the string. So I've just split the string into this query string. And then in the middle here, I'm outside of the text string in green. I can then type in, it's A192, that cell there. And you see it went that sort of purple color because it's a cell reference. And then all I need to do with strings is just put in these ampersands. What I'll do is I'll show you, let me show you this, another way to look at this as well.
So you might want to fix that to 192, not 912.
That's why I thought it was strange it was not showing up, actually. There we go. That's better. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So there's 192. We wouldn't have got much of an answer otherwise. So let me hit enter. And then let me just quickly just put this, so we'll change it to 192. So this formula now, you can see that this is what it's creating, this formula here that we built. So it's creating that string that we had written up here. Mm-hmm. All we've done is just turn it into a little formula now that uses these ampersands and a cell reference and splits it into 2 pieces. And then we just bring it all back together with a cell reference, because now I can make that dynamic and change it. And you see the data is changing to give me each month.
Yeah.
So you can now, quickly run through your months and analyze your data and maybe build charts just based off this data, just showing this month's transactions. So that's how we do that's how we move it to an external cell. And then one last thing, we'll do this last one is, let's just copy that down again. So I think it's just upset because I didn't have a value there. Okay, so what we need to do is we're going to build a drop down here. And a drop down, I'll show you if you've never seen one, is where I can have a little sort of picker to choose, a date or something from a drop down menu. So there's 2 ways you can do it. You can go data validation, or right click and choose data validation. And all we want to do is just click the button here and to select our range, because everything else will leave as the default. So we'll click that, we'll come into transactions, and we'll come to the month column and K2, and then actually just type this now all the way down to K. So that's the reference we'll use. So K2 to K. We'll click save. come back to our cache query demo. And then now we just have a nice little picker there with the data. And the reason we've used that month column rather than anywhere else is because when the Tillerbot adds more data, it's just going to add that data on the bottom for us. So all we have to do now is just, let's choose one first of all. So the first of the month. At the moment, it's not matching because what it's trying to match on is a number, not a date at the moment. So we just need to make one last change to our formula, which is to just change this into a date. So we can just use this month formula again, this time outside of the category column to put month there. And then we'll just now change the A to just hit that little one there. And then now it's going to just, as we select it, we didn't have a 7th there, 5th. And that's giving us the data we want. Now, the one last thing to mention is that it's that zero index thing that we talked about. So it's 1 month. So we've chosen the 1st of January, but it's giving us data from February at the moment because of that issue with the zero index. So essentially, the easiest way to fix that is just to subtract that 1 to make this January equal to a 0 here, and then it picks up the January data there. But again, there's a million different ways to skin a cat, as the expression goes, and there's different ways you could solve this problem as well. That's just one of them. So there we go. I think that was pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think with the sheet and with all of these formulas in yourself, just going through those steps, then hopefully you'll get to a point where it's you can understand it all and it's something useful.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Ben. So it looks like we have a few questions in the Q&A, and some did come through the chat. We'll address the Q&A questions first. Chris will read through those. If there's some that we don't feel like we can answer just in the time that we have left, or if we can go over a couple minutes and whoever wants to stay on. But if they're overly complex, we'll try to point you to a resource. If Ben or myself can answer them quickly, we will do so. So Krista, fire away.
Sure. The first one looks like it's for Ben. From your blog, you primarily only use Tiller for its ability to connect your bank accounts to your template. If you're creating your own templates, do you find it worth it to just pull info in once a day? Heather, you may have some thoughts to add to that too.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer. So the way I use Tiller is I use the automated email that comes every day as sort of just my daily connection, just to check my what's I've linked. I can see my balances and my credit card spends sort of for that day. And then maybe once a week or once every other week, I'll jump into the actual sheet, with my wife, and we'll categorize some stuff and we'll run through it. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I build it once and then maybe you tinker with it for a little while to get it to what you want, and then it's just there. So I really probably haven't touched the sheet that I built a year ago almost. I haven't really made any changes since then. I've just let the data build up and, see how it goes.
So it sounds like for your purposes, the real-time data isn't as important because you're using it just in a different way.
Exactly. I mean, more from a just check in periodically. So once a week probably.
Cool. Did you have anything to add to that, Heather? Good?
No,
Okay.
I think it's preference. Once a day works for me.
What add-ons and extensions would you recommend for Google Sheets, Ben?
Tiller. What else? I don't use too many. I used a few statistics ones. I'm gonna have to just quickly check now. See if I can.
Yeah, split transactions is a good one. And for those of you out there who aren't familiar, we do have a few add-ons that are our Tiller add-ons that pack a punch with different productivity, like enhancing capabilities. So.
Yeah, and then I use the Google Analytics add-on actually. That's the big one for me. So I use that quite a lot. I used to use one called Remove Duplicates, but that's now available natively in Google Sheets. So yeah, I don't really use too many though.
Okay, next question. Excel tables allow you to use column header names in your formulas instead of column letters. Makes it easier to read and troubleshoot. Can we do something like that in Google Sheets?
No, in a word. The Excel tables are powerful, and they do allow you to use that's sort of column name referencing, which doesn't exist in the same way in Google Sheets. The alternating colors that I briefly showed there allows you to apply formatting to a table that expands with the table, but it's just purely formatting. One thing, I mean, there's something you can do with the query function, which is to use a match function inside of it so you can type in the names of the column headings instead of the letters. But it's pretty complex and convoluted, so it's not really it's nowhere near as flexible or useful as the Excel version, unfortunately, at the moment. But there's a few things that don't cross over from each program.
This one may be slightly more for Heather. If I have two related categories, groceries and restaurants, but I want to summarize it as food along with other monthly expenses, what would be the best way to accomplish that task?
It's a good question. There's a couple ways you could probably do it. You could transition your categories to where you just have one. You consolidate it, and then you could recategorize your transactions pretty easily. That fill and drag method that you saw Ben using quite a lot, that's really handy. If you need to bulk kind of recategorize stuff, you would just sort your transaction sheet by the category column. But otherwise, if you have a group called food, we didn't demo this, but it's, I think a similar way to slice and dice the data with these queries would be to just build the query output using the group column instead of the category column, for example. Or if you don't feel comfortable working with the queries yet, we do have help articles on how to organize your spending data by group in a pivot table that's really easy to put together as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
The next question is how to put into a Tiller sheet money that is borrowed for an investment. So it's both a liability and an asset. This may be a little bit of a tricky one to think through. What sheets are best to use? Thanks.
Yeah, I think that one is more about workflows around how you're tracking balances. My first thought is probably that you would have, I don't know, because I feel like they would sort of net each other out. That is really tricky. I'm sorry I don't have a clear answer, but I think we can save these questions, and maybe if you write into support to us directly, we can kind of poll the team and see if somebody has an idea for a workflow there.
Next question, how do you show zeros as blanks? And I think Michael was referring to in the cash flow demo.
Yeah, sure. I can. I'll show you that actually. So what I'll do is I'll share the sheet again. I'll share my screen.
Okay.
If I can work out how to do that in the time. Here we go. Okay, so I think you can see the screen again.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So what we want to do is try and hide all of these zeros. So we can use custom number formats. So we'll come up to more formats, custom number formats. So I'll just leave that sort of showing at the moment. You go through number all the way down to more formats and then custom number formats. And that's what it's formatted as the moment. So if we let's copy that quickly. And then if we put a semicolon, we're splitting it into how we format positive and negative numbers now. So we'll do a negative number, just the same format, but with a little minus in front. If I then put another semicolon, but then leave the zero thing blank, and we hit apply, then they all disappear. But the zeros are still there. The data is still there, but it's just they're not showing now. We've just formatted them to be blank. That's probably the easiest way to do it with your data there. I just didn't include these ones. That's why they're not showing. Mm-hmm. That's what they're showing still. Sorry.
That's a useful trick. Next question. In Google Sheets, can you use the plus signs to expand? Example, to get more granular if you want more information. Can we follow what we're talking about here?
I'm not totally sure on that one. From John.
Yeah.
Maybe John, if you can elaborate more in the chat.
It may be.
Actually, no, I'm not sure either.
The follow-up the second question from someone else at the same about approximate time was how to expand a category to show the transactions included in it. I'm not sure if that might be related to the same train of thought.
Okay, so I think that we're talking about pivot tables here, where you can click on a category and it will pop out and expand. So there, actually, that's the answer there to John's question as well. It's a pivot table functionality, that one. So actually,
gotcha.
there was another question somewhere about why would we use the query function instead of the
I did answer
table?
I did answer that one just in the Q&A tool.
Okay.
Yeah, but you feel free to share your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, because it's sort of related here, I guess, in that, so we've seen one example there where a pivot table can do something that the query function can't, which is where you can click to expand things in a pivot table if you set it up a certain way. But the reason I like to use the query function sometimes is because it's a function. I can embed it with other functions, nest other functions inside, nest it inside other functions, link to it. And it's a lot more flexible than a pivot table, which just exists as its own thing that you don't really do anything else with. Both super tools though, so definitely both worth using. Great for exploring your data.
Let's see, where are we? Next question. Ben, I've never been able to figure out how to right-click, access a drop-down, or filter the value of a selected cell, only with a keyboard like I can in Excel. Does Google Sheets have this option, and how do we access this?
Good question, actually. I don't know the answer to that at the moment, actually.
I think he also asked, what keyboard shortcut did Ben use for right-clicking?
I just right-clicked, actually.
No, you just right-clicked.
I didn't use a shortcut for that.
Tricky.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. When I used Excel, I used every shortcut under the sun, and that really improved my workflow. I moved across to Sheets, and they originally didn't have so many, and they weren't quite the same. So I never really learned them with the same enthusiasm. And so I've just learned sort of the ones I need on a daily basis now. But yeah, I still sometimes just right-click, I'm afraid.
Let's see. How can you set up the cash flow to be bi-weekly instead of monthly?
So I think the way to do that would be you'd have to create another column that would probably have some sort of if formula to separate out your month in half, essentially, or your date in half. There's actually a formula called, there's a formula called week num. So week and then num after that, which gives you the number of the week. And so that might be a function that might be helpful in that case.
Yeah, we do also have the week data in the transaction sheet.
That's true, you do, don't you?
But it may be kind of tricky to like pull out what's considered bi-weekly just from that. So.
Yeah, I think you're going to need a helper column just to group those ones. Yeah.
Okay.
Next question, is there a way to do all others category in the cash flow demo if I only want to list a few categories and club everything else in one row?
So basically, I think rolling up everything but a select set of categories. So like these 6 categories and then everything else. Does that make sense, Ben?
Yeah. So I think that you would just have the 6 categories in this categories tab. And then you would just create one more that was everything else or miscellaneous. And then I guess as long as you chose in your transactions column sheets, you know, you set, if you have miscellaneous as a category, then you can just choose everything that goes into that miscellaneous.
I think from a data organization perspective of that, like that's how you want to categorize your transactions, that would work. I know that we have a prototype dashboard that has like your top 6 spending categories, and then like it rolls up everything else.
Okay.
It's based on the amount kind of thing. But I think that one's a little bit complex to try to field right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, again, there's definitely ways you could, you know, with the query function, for example, you can choose your top 6 by using that limit that we saw. So you would choose, you group everything by category, then you'd sort from high to low which we didn't actually look at in the demo, but you can sort from high to low with the query function, and then just limit to the top 6. And then maybe there's another way. Then you could just get everything else that was left. You would just bundle together into its own group.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that would be a little bit more involved.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that was it, wasn't it? Or
there's one more question I just pulled out of the chat, and that was, do you have a tutorial on how to make a visual dashboard with charts?
Yeah, sure. I can share some resources with Heather that can be in the little summary page from this webinar.
That sounds great, Ben.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right, I think that's all the time we have. Guys, we do have a couple other questions in chat, but we're going to go ahead and wrap it up just to respect everybody's time here. So we really appreciate you all attending tonight. This is being recorded, so we will send out a link to the recording tomorrow. You'll get it via email. You'll also get that one-page resource. And then when you close Zoom here, please take a few moments to just provide some feedback about the webinar experience tonight. And thank you so much, Ben, for being here with us tonight and doing these awesome demos. I think they went off pretty well without a hitch. Live demos are definitely hard. So thank you so much for taking your time to share your wisdom and knowledge with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, take care. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
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 Bye.